You know, we always hear that life is short, but what if it wasn't? What if one day you just stopped aging? You stopped getting sick? You couldn't die? It sounds like the ultimate dream, right? The final mountain for science to climb? But as we're about to find out, the reality of forever might be far, far from a dream.
Just let that sink in for a second. The clock keeps ticking for the entire world, but for you, nope. You've got an infinite number of tomorrows stretching out in front of you. What would you even do with that kind of freedom? Or, and this is the big question, is it really freedom at all?
Because here's the twist. The more you dig into the science of this whole idea, the more you realize that living forever wouldn't be a dream come true. It would be a perfectly designed trap, a nightmare from which you could never, ever wake up.
To really get why, we've got to start by looking at our own biology. See, our bodies were never, ever built to last forever. They were designed with an end point in mind, a kind of biological clock that's ticking down from the moment we're born.
That's right, getting old. It isn't some mistake. It's not a bug in our programming. It's a fundamental, absolutely intentional feature. It's a super complex process, right? It involves everything from cell damage to tiny errors in our DNA. And it's all governed by a very, very specific limit.
And there's a name for it. It's called the Hayflick limit. What it means is that every single cell in your body can only split and replicate a certain number of times, and then it just stops. That's it. This isn't just a theory, it's a hardwired biological reality, and it's all controlled by these tiny little things on our chromosomes.
Okay, so here's how it works. On the very end of each of your chromosomes, you've got these little protective caps. They're called telomeres. Now, every single time a cell divides, those caps get just a little bit shorter. The best way to think about it is like the wick on a candle, just slowly burning down. Once that wick is all gone, poof, the candle goes out. The cell stops dividing. That right there is aging at its most basic level.
But okay, let's just pretend for a minute. Let's say science figures it out. We find a way to keep that candle burning forever. We'd still have to face an even bigger, way more complicated enemy, our own minds.
It's a simple and kind of stark fact. Your brain, this incredibly complex thing in your head, it was not designed to handle an infinite amount of information. Every memory you make, every single emotion you feel, it all leaves a physical trace in your brain. And that space, it's not infinite.
Think about it like this. Over a normal lifespan, our memories create a pretty coherent story of who we are. And forgetting things, that isn't a flaw. It's actually a protective mechanism. It lets us move on from pain and loss. But in an eternal life, whoa, that protection just vanishes. Your whole identity would start to dissolve, just fragmenting under the crushing weight of centuries of memories, until you literally don't know who you are anymore.
And the emotional toll, I mean, it's just unimaginable. You would have to watch every single person you ever love grow old and die, again and again and again. Entire cultures, languages, places you knew, they'd all turn to dust. Love would just become this brief, painful moment in an endless, lonely existence. And every bad thing that ever happened to you, you'd carry that trauma forever.
So, faced with all of that, how would your mind even cope? Well, the most likely answer is actually pretty terrifying. To protect itself from infinite pain, your brain might just start shutting down your emotions. You'd stop feeling joy, stop feeling grief. You'd stop caring at all. You'd just become a detached witness to everything, not a participant.
And even if your mind could somehow survive that emotional wasteland, what about your physical self? What happens to a body that can't die? Well, it loses its entire reason for being.
I mean, think about our most basic biological drives, right? Hunger, fear, pain, the need for sleep. They're all signals tied to one single goal: survival within a limited time. They're emergency alarms telling us to act now to stay alive. But if you can't die, those alarms stop making any sense.
Suddenly, all those survival instincts, they're just echoes. They don't mean anything anymore. Hunger wouldn't feel urgent. Pain wouldn't be a warning of danger, it'd just be an annoyance. The very concept of danger itself would completely cease to exist for you.
So if your body's most fundamental drives just fade away, what motivation is left? If there's no urgency to eat, or to rest, or to avoid getting hurt, what in the world would compel you to learn something new, to create art, to explore, to do anything?
You'd find yourself in a state of, well, eternal procrastination. There would be absolutely no reason to start that big project today when you have literally millions of tomorrows to get to it.
After 1,000 years or 10,000, you might look back and realize you haven't really done anything at all, because there was never a reason to start.
So all of this, it really forces us to look at life and death in a completely different way. It asks us to consider this really radical idea. Maybe mortality isn't the curse we've always thought it was. Maybe it's a gift.
And this brings us to this incredible paradox. The fact that we know our time is limited is the very thing that forces us to live. It's what makes us get up in the morning, what makes us strive, connect with people, and love. The deadline is what creates the drive.
It really comes down to a simple principle we see everywhere. Scarcity creates value. A diamond is valuable because it's rare. A moment is precious because it will never ever happen again. Our time is the most valuable thing we have because it's finite.
So, in the end, the very things we might see as our biggest flaws, our fragility, our imperfections, the simple fact that we have an end, they're the exact same things that give life its meaning, its depth, and its beauty. The real miracle isn't figuring out how to cheat death. It's what we manage to do with the precious little time that we have.
So maybe eternity isn't about having an infinite number of seconds to waste. Maybe it's about living so fully and so intensely that a single moment feels like it's enough to last forever. So, the real question isn't how to live forever. It's what are you doing with the moments you have right now?